Listening to Radio 2 here, all that. Right, so it's been a while, hasn't it? Look at this. Now, see this muppet here? This is what I want to talk to you about. Now, we've got some grand weather here. We have here. You can see, can't you? All over the floor. It's grand. Sort of snowing in the sky. Started last night. We've only had a bit of a drop. We've got about, I don't know, about 4 maybe 5 inches, something like that. Any road, what I wanted to talk to you about today. My better half, Taryn, said to me, she says, "Oh, your listeners really like your stuff." I don't know whether that's true, but any road, if it is true, she says, "Your listeners really like. Why don't you do something useful like how to drive in winter?" And so I thought, well, I suppose I could do that, couldn't I? I'm going to give you my top 5 winter driving tips. And what I want to point out with you, I'm glad it come round corner actually, as it were, because I'm going to give you a bit of one of my top 5 things about winter driving is also related to safety, but kind of related to pet peeves. So you see this muppet, here's another one. Look. Now he's got 2 little side lights on here, as lad, but because 'tis Canada, we've got what they call daylight running lights. And daylight running lights are lights that are on all the time, but they don't actually switch on your backlights. Now, in these weather conditions like this now, it's hard to see, and you've got to put your lights on. Number 1, winter driving top tip from Brother Firth: put your lights on, because people need to see you, and it's hard to see in the snow, and things blend in. They blend, like cars disappear, and you get this sort of oppressive, sort of kind of fog. But it's not fog, is it? It's snow, isn't it? But you see what I mean? See this muppet here? He's got no back lights on because he hasn't put his lights on. He's got his daylight running lights on, but he hasn't got his lights on. So nobody can coming up the back, and it's hard. You can't see. There's another one here. Look, muppet here. Look, with his lights off. On the right hand side in the truck. Well, if they get further on, he says, I'm going harp on, aren't I? I'm on a bit of a rant. Firthy on one. Can you see this guy in the truck here skidding now? He's fishtailing him because he's only in 2-wheel drive, because it's you know, he hasn't, it's a truck, isn't it? So it doesn't have permanent 4-wheel drive. He's got selectable 4-wheel drive, or might have. What he's got here is fishtailing because he's only in 2-wheel drive now. Now, when they get further away, these cars without lights on, you can't really see them, and that's when it becomes dangerous. Can you see up on there's a bridge up there somewhere? Can you see? And when it's up there, you can see this fella here in the dark car that's going up there. You can't really see his light. You know, he'd be more visible if he'd had his lights on. Number 2 is correct and safe braking distance and separation between you and the vehicle in front. Now, I'm stood still here, but you can see I've left a big gap in front, and the reason for that is because I see some person behind me that's struggling to stop. There's a look in my mirrors while I'm stood still. Somebody coming up behind me can't stop. I can sneak forward to get out of the way because they think that this is an appropriate stopping distance, and they haven't perhaps gauged the slippiness correctly. And so they come up behind you and bump into the back of you, which is a bad day all round. And now you can see, look here, all over the road. All over the road they are, no driving skill sets. So, correct braking distance and sufficient distance between you and the vehicle in front is very important. Because that allows you to drive safely and move out of the way if all of a sudden they steer in the wrong direction or career across the road or some such thing. And it allows you to brake if you've misunderstood what's going on here with the sort of road conditions as well. It gives you the ability to mess up here and take a little bit longer to brake because you've got more gap in front of you. Now, there's a special figure that I learned when I was a small device learning to drive properly for the first time, and they said that you've got to leave 4 times the distance that you would normally have in dry weather for snow, because snow's slippy, and I think that's right. And I might even go so far as to say 5. So whatever gap you normally leave, and that depends upon your speed, whatever gap you normally leave between you and the vehicle in front, you should leave 5 times the amount in order to provide you that safe braking distance in the weather, in this snow and sort of icy sort of stuff. Now, here in Bertie, you see, what we've got here, we've got a lot of blowing snow. You can see as it's sort of the wind. We've got this northern, southern Alberta wind thing that comes along, and it's coming from the north at the moment, which is why it's scooching across now. What I was going to tell you is number 3 is anticipate the slip. And so anticipate the slide, anticipate the sort of deviation from normal. Now you're on a straight line here, and if I let go of the steering wheel or stomped on my brakes, even if I didn't have ABS or any of that kind of stuff, I'd keep going in a straight line because of Newton's because a body, carries on in the same whatever it is, unless affected by some opposite or opposing force or whatever the locution is, and so that's the story. So in a straight line you keep going, of course, don't you, because what else is there to do? But when you're making a turn, or you're on a curve, or the road dips to one side, or any of that kind of malarkey, it is possible that at that point the inertia of the vehicle is able to overcome the traction that you have on the ground, and you go into what's a slide or a skid or whatever it is, those sorts of things. Sort of pushing through about 12 or 14 inches now, give or take, and the corners are not being terribly conducive. So the vehicle wants to carry on in a straight line because Newton, and so if you sort of deviate from that, if you start sort of tweaking with that, that's when you end up with dramas. Now, one of the important things about driving in the winter is that you can anticipate where these sort of slides or potential sort of slips may occur, and if you can anticipate them, you can sort of prepare for them a little bit. So while you're driving, you have to think about how the vehicle is being driven across the terrain and whether it would want to go straight on at any point. Now there's a bit of a curve here, and if I was booting it down here, I need to slow down for the stop sign. Now at this point here, you see, of course, if I stomped on the brakes and I go into a sled, I go a sled. A sled, if I go into a sled or a slide, the same thing, pronounced differently. If I go into a sled, shoot off to the right hand side, because the vehicle will want to go in a straight line, you see. And so you've got to anticipate where these slide occurrences might happen. These potential slide things might happen. Roundabouts, we're coming up to one now, they're a bit confusing to Canadians, especially in Alberta, because we've only got straight roads here, and anything with a turn in it is a bit, it frightens them really. Any road, so a roundabout is all turning, you're scared to death of them. So right here, you see, as I'm moving the steering wheel and I put the power on to get through this bit of Schnee, the vehicle wants to keep going in a straight line like that, you see, and you've got to sort of just back off the throttle a bit to let the wheels catch up and to give the front wheels time to sort of steer, really, to sort of point themselves in the right direction. And so if you can anticipate where these slips are likely to happen or may happen, then you've got more of a chance of sort of responding to them if and when they do happen, and preparing for them if they don't. Now that leads me into number 4. Good, we're rattling through these. This is first time Firthy's ever done anything under 20 minutes. So the next one, number 4, is correct power application. Now, modern day vehicles have lots of power, especially this thing that I'm driving, Land Rover Defender P400. It's got all the power in the world, and so you've got a sort of a fine gap between the amount of power that you apply and the amount of traction that the wheels can put down. So the power doesn't, in these sorts of circumstances, the power doesn't actually mean a lot, which is one of the reasons they Land Rovers with, series Land Rovers used to do so well, because in snow they didn't have all power. What did they have, like 68 or 62 horsepower or something, flat out, and they made up for all that with gearing. And so you if you don't have a lot of power, you have a lot of gears and so on and so forth. Well, nowadays we've got both. We've got gears and power, and of course if you put the power down too much, then you get the slides and all these sorts of things, and that's really where the power application in the curves and the corners is important, especially around things like that roundabout there. If you put too much power down, if you drove like you were driving normally, then you'd sort of spin out a bit, really, or push yourself into the snow ditch or something, whatever. And so what you've got to do is you've got to think about how you're putting the power down. And the way to do that is to be progressive, to be gentle, to be steady on your power application. You can't see here, I guess, because the contrast is funny, but one of the tough things about snow is that it snow drifts. It comes into a big lump in the snow, like here you can see, can't you, where it's been sheltered by the trees, the snow collects, and potentially you've got a big snow drift here, and you need a bit of power to get through the snowdrift, because snow is quite power sapping. It's a bit like sand. It's sort of just, it's quite power sapping, really. And so you need a bit of power. But on these sorts of terrain here, this road here, you know, you've got reasonable traction. I've got Nokian Hakkapeliitta 9s on, so they're studded, and I've got good traction and good steering. A little less good in deeper snow, because you probably want an AT tyre in deeper snow, but so got good tyres and good traction, so you can use your throttle appropriately and anticipate larger sort of snowier bits like this, maybe even a snowdrift, and you can sort of rev up for them. But when you're making turns, when you're making corners, you need to sort of look at your line on the road. You can see the yellow line maybe a little bit here. I'm going over to it because I want to cut the corner, because if I did slide, I want to give myself a little bit of room on my side of the road in order to make that little bit of a slide before the tyres gripped again, and to do so safely without running into cars on the other side. And that's related to the power. So I suppose power and line and your driving, I suppose, are sort of connected, really. You need to make the lines as straight as possible round curves, because things want to go in a straight line, and curves are not straight, the opposite to straight. And so if you want to go if you want to go around a corner, sometimes it's best to make it as straight as possible. You see that with racing drivers around rallies and things, where they cut the corners and all that kind of stuff. And the reason for that is because it is faster. But the other reason for that, of course, is because here's one of ours, look, Evoke here in front. So one of the reasons, of course, for making the straight lines is because you say more traction. You've got less chance of spinning out. This Muppet here, Range Rover Evoke, look, he's got automatic headlights. Mine automatically come on when the weather's bad, and he's either got them on and he hasn't got them on, or whatever. I don't know what he's got going on, but anyway. So you've got all the technology up here, all the cash and flash and all that sort of stuff, and so where was I? What was I talking about, Firthy? What were you on about? I don't know where I was. Oh, I know, cutting corners, right. So you don't want to cut corners too much, of course, because then you end up in a right mess, don't you? Because you end up sort of going where the snow's deep, and then it'll drag you in. So you want to just be careful to pick your line so it's not too deep, but it's also not too wide, but it's also not too straight. Now, related to power application, so this I suppose is 4.5. Related to power application is knowing when to take your power off. And when you're going around corner, you should never when you're going around that corner there, you should never have your power off. You should have a little bit of power to help you pull through. And that's the same for front wheel drive car, back wheel drive car, whatever. So you need to be able to sort of the wipers are going nuts. You need to be able to sort of drive round. I used to have a friend, and he said you've got to drive through the corners, and that's sort of right. What he means by that is you've got to apply power, ever so gently, but you've got to apply power to make sure that the vehicle's continually pulling. And to do that, you often use your gears to drop a gear or two, so that you're not going as fast, but you've still got the ability to sort of pull through the gears. Not, to have the car being driven rather than for the weight of the car to pull. And the reason for that is because while you're pulling with your tyres, while you're actually driving round the corners, you have got some traction because the wheels are actually pulling. They're trying to do what they do. Now, the alternative to that is being pushed, because there's no application of power to the wheels, and they're being rolled, as it were, by the car's inertia. The weight of the car is sort of pushing it round a corner, and that's when you start to get into dramas, because if you're in a bit of a skid, the wheels don't keep up, if that makes sense, because they're being pushed, they're not being driven, and sort of off you go, and you sort of start drifting across the road because you've no power application there. And so knowing when to back off the throttle and knowing when to apply the throttle, there's been a bit of a tragedy here, look, is important. You've got just sort of know where to back off, and what you do is you back off before a corner and then you sort of pull through it a bit, if that makes sense. So letting the vehicle back off and using the engine braking is important in letting you know when and where it is that you need to apply the power. So in a minute you're going to see, as I crest this hill here, you see I'm going to back off the throttle just at the top of the hill because I don't know what's on the other side. It might be a stranded car sideways, so I'm going to back off the throttle here now. So the inertia is slowing me down because I'm going up an hill, and now I'm going to be able to apply a little bit of power as I pull through this curve here where it's likely to be skiddy, and then join this really terrible junction here safely under power. And then I'm going to merge, you know, as you can see, I'm going to merge under power rather than having to stop there and hoping that my brakes are going to keep up, or the tyres, more accurate. The brakes will keep up, but the grip's going to let me down. So these things are important. So power is very closely related to not power, if that makes sense, and knowing when to back off the throttle is almost as important as knowing when to apply it and how much to apply. And you have to sort of apply very gentle power, because rapid sort of wide throttle openings sort of rev up and they spin the tyres very quickly, and they don't give the tyres chance to overcome the inertia of the vehicle, the sort of weight of the vehicle. And that leads us to number 5. This is going to sound very odd because it's something that you should be doing all the time, but people generally don't do because they're too busy in their own world, full of their own imaginations, and that is pay attention to what's going on around you. Especially in North America, where the attitude here is that it's my car and my road and my area and my bubble and they pay no attention to anything else going on. So what I'm going to suggest now is that you have to pay attention to what's going on around you, and you can only do that if you sort of look about and see what's going. Is somebody, I mean, pay attention to turn signals, of course, but also pay attention to roads that come, and pay more attention further away. Lift your eyesight to see further, if you see what I mean. Go beyond where you should be looking, where you normally look, to see beyond, because you need to anticipate further in advance. You see, you need to be sort of well in advance of what you would normally be, and in order to do that you need to be looking further away. So I'm not looking at this set of traffic lights, although I am sort of, but I'm actually looking at the next set. I'm thinking, well, are there any cars coming on there? And if they are, like this truck here, is he doing all right? Is he becoming stranded? Is he struggling in the weather? What's going on? Like, is there a car coming from me right? Where's the cars behind me? What are they doing? Are they moving too fast? Are they moving too slowly? Aren't they moving at all? Should they be moving and aren't moving? Are the turn signals going on? Is there, you know, your usual kind of pedestrian things? Where's the pedestrians? Are they slipping? Are they not slipping? You know, is there a random dog? It's all that kind of stuff. And so if you do that, you need to be looking further ahead, because you can't respond as quickly as you would prefer to respond, because it's sliding, right? So you might, if you respond in the usual sort of times, then you're going to be stuck, because something will be happening up there and you try and react to it, and then you react too slowly, and then you're on it too slowly, or too quickly, as it were, because you can't stop, or the other traffic's moving too quickly and they can't stop. So pay attention to what everybody else is doing. And what I mean by that is to look all around you at every single thing that's what, and not just to gauge, not really just to gauge what is happening, but you have to sort of put a little bit of work into what you think might be happening. So when you see a car and they're not using the turn signals, because that's another thing, it's not just BMW owners over here, it's everybody. When you, like this car here, are they going to be all right going around this corner? Are they actually, you know, you can see he's making progress, but he might slide, and if he gets slid and he's in the middle of the road, am I going to run into him because he didn't make that turn in enough time? You need to sort of back think or advance think about all these potential dramas that other people can have as a function of their perhaps not knowing how best to drive in this sort of weather. Maybe that's the sort of a thing that you need to be on, you know. And so that sort of anticipation, that sort of thought about what other people are doing and how they're doing it is very important, because that affects how you drive. It affects how you're able to make progress and how you're able to avoid other people's dramas. Other people have accidents too, and your job is not just to, you know, not just to not steer into a lamppost or some other car, but to also avoid some other person that's trying to do that and failing. And so you've got to think about your position in the road, and you've got to think about you know, whether the lights are on and whether the cars are stopping appropriately, and whether the car behind you, and you're sat at a set of traffic lights, whether the car behind you is able to stop. Are they capable? Are they going too fast? And do I need to move up out of the way to help them, you know, to give them a bit more stopping distance, because they haven't really sort of anticipated the correct stopping distance, and they've made a right mess of it all. So there's Firthy's top 5 tips. So that's that. Well, thanks very much for tuning in again. What is it I've got to say here, please? Please like and subscribe to the video so that I can bring you more exciting content. Sound like one of them things. Anyway, thanks very much for tuning in. We'll see you all in the next one. I'm sorry it's been a while since we chatted last, but I have a lot of work on, and it's coming up Christmas, so I'm sort of struggling to get everything sorted before we have to take a sort of mandatory break. So there you are. All right. Thanks a lot, peeps. Cheerio.